The Republic Media Network has questioned the Trump administration on tariffs doublespeak. In a direct exchange of emails on the subject, in what is now the first direct exchange on the controversial tariffs between Republic Media Network and the US government. On the 19th of August, we here at the Republic Media Network wrote to the US administration, including the US State Department and its embassy in India. And we referred to a recent statement that was made of the White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, who had said, and I quote, "India needs to start acting like a strategic partner of the US if it wants to be treated like one," while adding that India was now cozying up to both Russia and China. We quoted Navarro, that is, to the US by requesting the US State Department and the embassy to clarify if this was the official position of the United States. And we received the first response on Wednesday morning around 8:30 a.m. from John Brown, who is the acting spokesperson for the US Embassy in India. And he told Republic in the email that the United States engages in full and frank dialogue with India, including on India's relationships with China and Russia. As the president has made clear through his recent executive order, India's importation of Russian oil undermines US efforts to counter Russia's harmful activities. President Trump remains committed to pursuing peace, and we caution countries around the world, including India, against taking actions that could finance Russia's war in Ukraine. Notice the words, caution India against taking actions that could finance Russia's war in Ukraine. So we found it interesting here at Republic that the US government spoke in their response to us of actions that could finance Russia's war in Ukraine. And we then wrote a follow-up mail this morning, on Wednesday morning, asking 4 specific questions. Question 1, we asked them if America could confirm if it continues to import uranium and other key minerals from Russia as part of their imports program, as seen and displayed, publicized with full details on the US ITC website. Second question, we asked them whether America could confirm if their imports from Russia had grown over 20% this year on the back of mineral imports like uranium, palladium. Third question, we asked America if these numbers were to be true, then would America itself be violating its own rule and principle while asking other countries to avoid trade with Russia, while it traded with Russia itself all these years? And the fourth question, we asked them whether America planned to stall these imports of key minerals like uranium and palladium from Russia, and also, by its own definition, stop funding the war machine in Russia. And to these 4 questions, we received a one-line response. And the response was, we would refer you to USTR for specifics on trade. That's the response of the US government to Republic this morning. The US government, in its email exchange at this point, completely tried to dodge us on the issue of America's own trading with Russia. The timing of this is critical. Republic Media Network has cornered the American government on trade tariff war amid the India-China talks, while Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, is in India. And this is also the first time that an Indian news network has cornered the US government amid the trade war. The response is coming at a time when Donald Trump has met Putin in Alaska a few days back, and Putin himself, during the joint conference, admitted that Russia's bilateral trade had increased over 20% with America in the last year. So looking at the US response, let me get the perspective of Abhishek Kapoor, our senior executive editor. Abhishek, when you look at the email exchange, right, their response, now what's your takeaway from that?
Well, my takeaway is, Niranjan, and I've seen your questions also. I think they were very specific, pointed questions, and they had given numbers. So essentially, I would say the reply is a very templated reply, and effectively avoids answering the straight questions that you had asked. But that seems to be the situation that the bureaucrats and diplomats in the Trump administration are going to face in the lower rung of the order, because obviously it's not a principled position that the Trump administration has taken vis-a-vis India. It's like a wrecking ball that they are hitting at the larger India-United States relationship. Now, look at these statements one by one. Peter Navarro, which you quoted, he's saying if we are strategic allies, we behave like strategic allies. What about Viktor Orban of Hungary? What about the European Union? If the principle is that you would be punished for doing business with China, what about the American numbers, which Putin himself exposed while addressing press along with President Trump?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the larger question, China is an adversary. But if it's an adversary, what are you doing to punish the adversary? Nothing, zilch. So obviously, it's a case of double standards.
Yeah, but wanted to get your view also on this classic doublespeak of saying that anybody who does business with Russia is funding the war machine. When you look at the numbers, and the first response was interesting, because when we asked them whether that's the stated position of America, what Peter Navarro said, they said yes, and they in fact added to that, saying that we caution India, right, on doing business with Russia and funding the Russian war machine. Now, by that definition, of course, they also fund the Russian war machine.
100%.
America funds the Russian war machine. Europe funds the Russian war machine.
I can give you numbers. So look at this. I have carried some numbers. Trump is stuck on oil. And so it says that India, and they admit that India is the second largest buyer of Russian oil, China being the first one. Almost half of Russian oil is being bought by the Chinese. And the Trump administration is absolutely mum. I mean, J.D. Vance, the vice president, was tying himself into knots, trying to suggest that with China, it's a little more complicated. I think the only complication with China is that China can hold you by the scruff of your neck, because China can really stare you down. That's the only complication, I believe, with the Chinese. Because look at the numbers. Coal imports, for example, China imports 44%, India exports just 19%, less than half of China. Turkey imports, I beg your pardon, not export, imports from Russia, 11%. In South Korea, which is an ally, 9%. In terms of oil products, India is not even there in top 3. Again, Turkey is 26% importing oil products from Russia, 13% China, 12% Brazil. LNG, look at this. 51% of Russian exports of LNG go to European Union countries. 21% go to China, 18% to Japan. Again, India is not there in top 3. So I think, Niranjan, it's absolutely clear this is not about energy exports of Russia and India buying them.
So what is it about then? What is it about when it comes to India? Why is he singling out India? And your takeaway from all the interactions?
He's singling out India, unfortunately, for we did not, or we failed to perhaps massage his ego on the India-Pakistan standoff. He jumped the gun. It could have been handled better with both the sides. I would concede maybe our side also could have handled it better in terms of communication. It could have been planned in a manner that it looked like Americans were involved and that we stood our ground. But the way President Trump jumped the gun before dawn, he came out with that tweet.
Yeah.
Remember, it was still not morning there in the United States. And so while, of course, the Americans were part of the back channel dialogue like they have always been during the Kargil War, during 1971, during 1965, whatnot. I mean, going back to 1948. So there is no gainsaying or doubting that the Americans were involved or not involved. The question is how it was to be projected. I think in that case, President Trump, in his anxiety to really claim the Nobel Peace Prize, sort of created a situation from where there was no face saver either for the Americans or for the Indian side. So I think the relationship is essentially in a mess because of that.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, Abhishek.